this is functions type 2. So, and I call these type 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is not something you'll find on YouTube. This is just the way I teach them. So, what I call a type 2 function is where we can pass data to it from main, or if it's called from another function, okay, whatever, we can send information to it. And you'll see how that's done. But the function is not returning anything. So, again, we have to declare the function before void main void. And that would be void. I'm not returning anything, so that's the same as the type 1. Nothing's being returned, so I put void. Then whenever I want to name it, right? And then in here, the types and names of any data being passed. If there's more than one, commas go in there. So for example, if I'm going to be sending in an integer, I would say int and then whatever, d. If I was going to send it two integers, int d, and then int whatever, a. Doesn't matter what you call these, and because it doesn't matter what you call them from main, you'll see that. And or let's say now it's not like a declaration. I can't say like int d if I'm having two ints, int d comma a. You can't do that. You have to have both. Okay, what if or if I'm sending three ints, int t, right? There we go. Or if I'm sending a double x followed by a char, okay? Or if I'm sending a string, followed by a double, followed by an int. Okay, whatever. There it is. Okay, the writing of it, here's the header. Sometimes we call this the definition. Sometimes you'll hear me say definition. That's the same thing as the writing of it. Remember, the definition is the same as the declaration without the semicolon. So if I did have a function like this, the header would be this without the semicolon. There it is. Okay, if it was this, that was my function. I just took an int. That would be my function header. And then we would write whatever the function does in here. Okay, to user call it. Okay, if I'm sending it an int, right, I would put in here, right, either an integer itself, a constant, right, or, right, that'll work because I'm sending it an integer, or I can send it a -3, right, an integer, or I can send it a variable that's an integer. So now I'm sending it m, right, or in this case I'm sending it 8. Now remember, it doesn't have to be the same as this guy. This is not the same variable as this. So what happens, you'll see what happens in the example. In other words, I didn't have to call this C just because I was sending it into something called C. Right? I could, but it's not the same C anyway. Remember scope, anything that is declared inside main between these two. Okay, anything that's declared in here. So for example, int A and B, they're not known outside of these two swigglies, this block of code. So what I'm saying is that I could have called this C here, right? But it's not the same C as what's going to be going into this. It's the same value. But you'll see that as we go, as you see, you'll see that as in the examples that we show. Let's say I was sending this an int and a char, right? So this would be char m, right? And then let's say I have an int x equals 9 and a char h equals a capital letter P, right? So an example of using the function, I can send it, okay, I could send it 6 and then the character, the $, right? I can do that, right? Because the first piece of data is going to be an integer. The second one has to be a char. In other words, I couldn't be in this order. I couldn't be sending it that and then the integer. No, it has to be in this order. The int followed by the char. Okay, I can also send it 4, 4, or the letter T, right? Or I can send variables that represent any values. So I can send it x, right? X is an integer. In this case, it would be 9. Or I can send it and then send it h, right? H is the capital letter P. I need that semicolon there. All right, so let's see how this works. Here's an example of a type 2 function called calcsum, right? A program that uses a type 2 function called calcsum. Main's going to ask a user to enter 2 integers. These 2 integers are then going to be passed to the function, this function, calcsum, where their sum is going to be calculated and then output. And then we'll jump back into main, right? So we're going to have a function called calcsum that's going to take 2 ints. There we go. There's my declaration, void calcsum, and I'm going to say int x and comma int y. And then I have my main, right? Well, mains, in this case, is going to output high. Then it's going to output enter 2 integers. I declare 2 integers, a and b. I'm going to have a user enter them, right? And then I'm going to call calcsum, and I'm going to send it whatever a and b is. Now we're sending values. So let's say they entered 9 for this guy and 4 for this guy. So a is storing 9, b is storing 4. Okay, well, I'm going to call calcsum. So what's going to happen is 9, the value 9, not a itself, the value from a, in this case 9, gets passed on down, and x takes on that number. So x is going to take on the value 9 here. So wherever you see x in here, inside the function, between these 2 squigglies, wherever you see x, it's going to be 9, unless you change x inside there, of course. Okay, and likewise, 4, which is stored in b, is going to be passed into y. So y is storing 4 in here. Y is storing 4. So anywhere you see y in between these 2 squigglies, it's going to be storing the number 4, unless I change it. If I said y equals 2 in here somewhere, right after that line of code, y would be 2. So right now we're going to output, or the function's going to output the sum of those 2 numbers is, okay, well, when we get to this line, x is 9. So it's like saying 9 plus y, which is 4. 9 plus 4 is 13. So it's going to output 13 right there. And then it's going to jump back into the line after where it was called. Okay, there's one more line of code, which is C outing by, and then we're done the program right there. Right, and here's the output. Well, here's an example of output. Let's say they enter 3 and 8, right? 3 would be passed. By the way, these are called pass by value functions. This is why we're passing the values. We're not passing actual variables. We're passing the values. So it's like copying, making copies of what's stored in there and copying it into these guys. So in this case, they entered 3 and 8. So A would be 3. B would be 8. So 3 would be passed into X, and X would be 3. And 8 would be stored, would be set down and into y. And then see out the sum of those two numbers is 3 plus 8, which is 11. Go to the next line. We're done. We're done executing this function. Jump back and output by, and then we're done the program. So there's some sample output. Again, these are called pass. We're going to be using pass by value functions. You can also pass by a reference or a pointer. We're not going to get into that in this, especially in the situation, the virus situation. I don't think we're going to have time for that. But you have to at least know pass by value. And that's type 2 functions.